an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Gravity Falls, Season 1, Episode 20, Gideon Rises. In this episode, I can't even say with any confidence, and then we find out what's behind Stan's secret door. Because, really, no we don't. No we don't. I don't know what this means. I don't know what any of this means. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Melanie for commissioning this episode and bearing with me after I messed up last week and watched both episodes. This was originally meant to be a time slot for me to live watch this episode with y'all. But like I said, I watched them together. So what we're doing is I'm recording on the finale today, and then the next time slot, which would have been to record on the finale, we are going to have a live watch of the shorts. So those of you who have Disney Plus, or maybe if you have YouTube, I don't know if they're available on YouTube, but I am going to watch all of the shorts, which together come to about 53 minutes. So it leaves a little bit of time for commentary between them, but I won't be recording on the shorts. I'll just be doing that live watch, and then we'll be moving on to the live watch of the premiere episodes of season 2. So those events are on facebook.com/unspoiledpod for those of you who want to, double check those or get notifications that they're about to happen, reminders. And again, sorry, Melanie, but I sent her some cookies to try and make it up for her. Melanie and I have both had a very stressful week, so hopefully this is the last thing that is going to come up that we have to worry about. All right, so this episode starts off with our whole crew crashing at Seuss's abuelita's place. This is such a funny thing because I always forget that his name is short for Jesus, that he is meant to be Hispanic. I don't know if he's meant to be Mexican or, another, it feels like he's meant to be Central American rather than South American, but, I just had completely forgotten about that aspect of who he is because he doesn't really have an accent or anything, and his abuelita doesn't really have an accent either, really. They have her speak Spanish, but it's like very poorly done American accented Spanish, which in some ways makes it funnier and in some ways makes me go, what are you doing? And I really enjoyed the whole look of her. It feels that whoever drew her and gave her lines has an abuelita, because this like constant wearing of large smock-like aprons, 100% on brand, and the response to everything with vacuuming and or I would say Windex or any sort of like spray cleaner. That was my abuela. Her house smelled so strongly of Pine Sol all the time. She was just a clean freak. And it was really the kind of thing that, like, I think my mother was self-conscious about the fact that she wasn't as good a housekeeper, but my mother also had to work full time and, but yeah, it's definitely true that there's lots of cooking, there's lots of overfeeding, and there's lots of cleaning if you have an abuelita. So yeah, I love this whole thing, this weird like setup here of all of them living here and abuelita seeming to be completely unmoved by it all. Like Mabel goes up to Seuss's grandma and like rubs at her face and says that her skin is old lady soft, and it's just real creepy. And she doesn't move. She doesn't say anything. So the TV comes on and we have this ad from Gideon, or it's the news, but it's like they are reporting and basically giving Gideon free ad time, which is a thing that local news does, which has always bothered me a little bit, but like is a tough line there sometimes between something that's like an event that people want to know about and something that's like being sold. And there is, Owen mentions this a lot, and I know that I'm not going to like get it right when I repeat it to you guys, but he frequently brings up how there are a lot of Simpsons like references and little small in-jokes throughout this show. And this moment where they show a file photo of Gideon and he's like surrounded by puppies and winking at the camera. And then they show a file photo of Grunkle Stan and he is literally dressed as the devil surrounded by flames. Apparently that is a reference to a moment of Homer Simpson's file photo. So I just wanted to mention this. I don't know if anybody out there knows what Owen is talking about. I don't, but I thought if you did, you might get a kick out of that. There's also a moment later when they're playing with little trains or little cars on a track, and they don't have any batteries for them. And evidently this exact setup and seated in this exact way was a moment from that same episode. So take that as you will. But yeah, so the whole thing is meant to promote the fact that Gideon is going to be having a big sort of press conference, really, in front of the shack. And he says, I'd like to cordially invite all the good people of Gravity Falls to join me. Free admission to everyone who wears their Gideon pins. And then he holds it up and he says, it's my face. Who does Gideon's voice? Is this anybody that I would know? Are these all like voice actors that like, I know that who Mabel's voice is. I don't remember anybody else. It was really funny because I watched a short the other day that had the actress in it who plays Mabel, and she's in so many things, but seeing her on screen without, with the new context of her being Mabel, it was a really weird moment. But whoever does Gideon's voice is really good. Man, he is just so distinctive and so weird sounding. And Dipper is really feeling like he feels like it's up to him to fix things because in the past he always has been the one. And there's just a sort of pressure on him that I find interesting. And Mabel says that she will step up and be the one to like save the family this time. And in the end, they both sort of are right. But yeah, I sort of like this aspect being examined a little bit more. This responsibility that Dipper feels that he really shouldn't. He's a child. And at this point, all things considered, he doesn't know about the relevance of this like journal that he found or anything like that. So it just goes to show how little faith he has in that Grunkle Stan can clear this up, whether or not it is a supernatural issue, which is kind of damning, honestly. Like that feels like, ouch, but there it is. So Grunkle Stan is really like, he's enraged at the fact that everybody seems to have fallen for this dude's shtick. And he decides that he is like going to crash this press conference and tell everybody the truth. But of course, as it turns out, nobody fucking wants to hear it because everybody really likes Gideon and he doesn't really have any proof. All he can say is like, I didn't voluntarily sell it. And, because this is a cartoon world, there's, of course, you seal the deed and you own the place. That's not how it works in life. Like that deed still has Stan's signature on it for one thing, but nobody seems to be like at all worried about that. But it's just meant to underline the fact that they all have their like preconceived ideas and their biases and their almost just celebrity worship as well. And our crew rolls up to this conference in disguise. Seuss is wearing a hat that says "Not Seuss" with a beard taped to his face. And Gideon announces his new plans for the former Mystery Shack, and he pulls a sheet off of a model of Gideon Land, which is this, like, amusement park. And there are several giant statues of him. This is so amazing, you guys. Like, I cannot think of something more horrifying than... I mean, it's like Dollywood, but, like, for a child, which somehow seems way creepier to me. I've never been to Dollywood, full disclosure. I've heard it's great. But this dude has, like, more than one ride with his own head spinning around on it. It's very alarming. And it turns out that he, like, got Waddles as well and dressed Waddles up in a Gideon costume, which that is really the thing that fucking grinds Mabel's gears. And she starts to freak out, and then Grunkle Stan says, "All right, that's it," and gets up on stage and literally kicks Gideon off the stage and tries to tell everybody that he stole my property. But they're all just like, "Yeah, I don't think so. I recall you gave the property to me. Here's the deed right here." So they all, you know, get escorted out by head chin security, and they are standing next to the fence with Wendy, who is really bummed out because, as it turns out, that she's, like, going to have to leave town if she doesn't have this job. She's going to have to go and get a job somewhere else across, you know, in the next town over. And this, of course, is something that Dipper cannot abide. I've said before that a lot of Seuss's lines don't really land well for me. They don't really work for me. I feel like he's given some jokes that are, like, so telegraphed that by the time he says them, I'm already tired of it. But this joke doesn't really get old for me. He starts to say, "Oh yeah, and that'd be really bad for Dipper because of his enormous crush on eucalyptus." Guys, there is a similar joke on Community where they start to say something and then they try and redirect the sentence at the last second, and they completely fail and say the word anyway. And the first time it happens in front of Jeff, he looks at Troy and it's just like, "Dude, what the fuck?" And Troy's like, "It's really hard to think of another word." And then Jeff immediately tries the same thing and then realizes and tries to come up with another word and can't, and stops and looks at Troy and he's like, "You're right. It is hard to come up with another word." And I enjoy that joke every single time. So I felt like Zeus really pulled this one off. Yeah, Melanie is in the comments saying, "Saved it." Yep, totally, Zeus. Apparently he did save it because Wendy doesn't show any sort of, like, acknowledgement that she gets what's just been said in front of her, which I find a little bit frustrating, that, like, she's supposed to be sort of totally, what's the word? Oblivious, you know, but whatever, it's fine. So then let's see, they're all, like, discussing what they're going to do. Is this when Robbie turns up and is carrying his boombox? Yeah, that's it. He is the worst. She gets on her bike, puts her helmet on even, and like, pedals away, and Robbie chases her, talking about how he has been sending her texts but she hasn't been responding, so maybe he needs to send her more. Sweetie, that ain't it, son. And finally, we see Grunkle Stan, and he's on the phone with their parents. We don't ever hear their parents' voices or anything. We don't ever find out even what their names are. But he is talking to them about sending their kids home. And it's a really sad moment. Like, I had been saying how much I love Grunkle Stan's character. And this in particular, you know, he really loves these two kids. He's grown super attached to them in a way that he clearly didn't see coming at all. And I really love the sense of obligation and responsibility that we're seeing from him after so much time of it feeling really like he doesn't, that he sees taking care of them as kind of not his job. You know, that was really the impression at first, as they show up and he's just willing to like let them go off and do whatever they feel like, and he's not really going to supervise them too much. And just sort of, you know, like, yeah, you got foisted on me for the summer, but you know, I'm not gonna. And then you see like he's really grown to care about them. And when Mabel asks if they can order pizza, he like pulls his pockets out and realizes he has no money and looks really bummed out. And I don't know. I loved this. I thought it was really sweet and sad and terrible. So then we cut to Gideon, who's describing what the fuck the deal is with these 6-fingered books. And it's so weird. He says that this was like some mysterious author who learned secrets too powerful for one man. And he hid his journals where he thought no one would ever find them, because he knew that if the journals were ever brought together, they would unleash a gateway to unimaginable power. Codes and maps have led me to believe the other book's buried somewhere on this very property, and I intend to find it. So, yeah, Gideon is over here thinking that there's only 2 books because he's precious and he doesn't understand how magic tends to work. I could have told him that there's more than 2. I mean, come on, that's just to be expected, right? But it turns out later that there's 3, and he's big mad about it. So we have this moment of poor Grunkle Stan having to tell the kids that they have to go home. And he says that Gideon won and gives them a couple of bus tickets. And it is just so heartbreaking to see him like turn around and walk out, clearly feeling like he failed them. Also, I would like to give a special shout out to whomever illustrated the Abuela's place and made sure that there was a photo of Seuss at some stage in his childhood in every single shot of this. Like, he's a baby. In some he's like an adult, but then there's everything in between. It's amazing, and I just love it. I love all of them. They're all so stupid. So they are turning to the journal again. And this is something that winds up being a bit of like a source of insecurity later, because it seems Gideon, when he finally takes the book away from Dipper, really zeroes in on a sore spot by insinuating that if Dipper has ever succeeded in anything like heroic or daring in this town, it is not because he is heroic or daring. It is because he has had this source of crucial information. And basically it's like, none of this was you. This was all this book spoon feeding information to you. You don't get to claim that. And that's not fair. People can all have the same source of information and choose to do totally different things with it. But it's obvious that Dipper is really, he just doesn't have a ton of confidence. And Gideon just finds that little weak spot and really like leans on it. And Dipper begins to believe it. And I hate watching that, you know? But yeah, there's like all of the fonts and everything when we go to Gideon Land. The fonts are very like Disney. The sign on the fence says we're building the magic, which is, I have to assume, the exact signage that they have at Disney. I love Mabel constantly trying to make this grappling hook a thing. And I'm delighted that it winds up working in the end. You know, you have to assume it's Chekhov's grappling hook, that it's going to come up and wind up saving their asses in the end, but I didn't see it coming when it did. So yeah. And he starts to like go through all of the different creatures that are in these woods that they could ask to help them. There's like a barf fairy, butternut squash with a human face and emotions. What? And one of them is a blueprint. And he says that he's been staring at it, but it's clearly only a piece of it. And he's in the middle of talking about this when Mabel cuts him off, and it's just like, whatever, we need an army. And he's like, how about we go to the gnomes? And understandably, Mabel's not super thrilled about this because they tried to make her their queen against her will just the last time. So they go into the woods and they fucking find the king of the gnomes sitting in a old bathtub, naked, I assume, with squirrels running around him. And he's picking up squirrels and rubbing his armpits with them like he's scrubbing with soap. And he tries to tell the two of them that this is normal for gnomes, but I'm going to assume that it's like a weird fetish thing that they put in for some reason. And honestly, being naked in a tub full of soft, furry animals doesn't sound terrible, except that squirrels have claws. You want something that's got no means of scratching you or biting you. And so really what you want is pillows. You want pillows. But yeah, he's laughing at them, saying, oh, you came crawling back. Changed your mind about marrying me? And Mabel's like, no, God, we wanted your help. And he's like, okay, you just reacted this way. And then you ask for my help. Come on. What do you think? I'm going to say yes to this? And they're like, oh, we have somebody else that you can marry. Her name's Gideon, and she has lovely white hair. Which I'm just like, what are you doing, guys? Excuse me, goodness. I had a moment where I paused to look at the camera dramatically, but then it turned into a weird yawn and made the pause too long. I don't understand their long-term plan here. They are going to have to realize that Gideon isn't a girl pretty quickly, and then they're going to have incurred the wrath of the gnomes. But I guess they haven't thought that through far enough. And of course we have Schmebulok coming back, bless him. And the gnomes agree that they will help out. We jump over to Grunkle Stan, who is at the diner, and he's like just really upset over the fact that the whole town doesn't believe him and that he's letting his kids down. And then Seuss is here, and he turns out to be doing this as a part-time job. This becomes a running gag that everything in the town that needs doing, Seuss is the one doing. And you would have thought that because of that, I would have seen it coming when Seuss turns up as the bus driver later, and I didn't. That still was like a really good joke for me. I don't know why I didn't see that coming at all, because you would really think, but And Owen didn't either, so we both started cackling, and he's just like, "What's up, dudes?" Yeah, so this is a fun little bit that starts here, and we go to the confrontation with the gnomes and Gideon, and it really looks like they've gotten the best of him here. I love how the gnomes work too, using one another as weapons, using their hats as weapons. They're like stringing bows with other gnomes as if they're arrows. And Gideon, it looks like he's really been overpowered, but then he pulls out this whistle and begins to blow it. And it turns out that this basically is like extreme pain for gnomes, and they immediately turn coat and decide that they are going to obey Gideon because he's got the really painful whistle, which, you know what, I'm not even that mad about it. Makes sense to me. It's fine. You guys weren't working with these gnomes in good faith. I'm not mad that they decided to betray you. And as they hold back Dipper and Mabel, Dipper drops the journal, and he drops it. Key is that he drops it while it's like, so that it falls open. And Gideon is super duper excited because he still thinks there's only two. And he thinks that this is all set now, that he's got what he wants and he's good. And he's like yelling into Dipper's face because Dipper's like, give me that back, or I'll, and he says, you'll what? Huh? What? No muscles, no brains. Face it. You're nothing without this. Bye-bye forever, y'all. And then he blows the whistle and they get carried away in a tide of gnomes. So he goes back inside and he like has his moment of realizing that there's fucking 3 of them and has this huge tantrum. And this is the best thing ever. He turns around and is like, I can't let them leave town, because at this point, both Dipper and Mabel, well, really mostly Dipper, he's given up. Mabel has to go along with like how he feels, because between him and Grunkle Stan, she's clearly outnumbered. You know, she feels like they should continue to fight back. Grunkle Stan is not really interested. Neither is Dipper. What is she supposed to do in the face of that? So they have to pack their stuff and they're like getting on the bus to leave. And at this point, Gideon unveils his Mecha Gideon, which is a giant robot version of himself that had been presented as if it were just part of the amusement park. I would love to know what his plans were for this thing, because like it looked like it was just maybe going to be the mascot of the amusement park, like in the center that you like go stand by and you take a picture with it, or that maybe it was like going to be a part of a ride. But if it's just this giant robot that like walks around, is Gideon planning to just take over the town? Is that what he wants to do? Like, was he planning on pulling a Godzilla and just like smashing the place? I don't know. Melanie says he even had a line saying he took a part-time bus driver job while talking at the bar and diner talking to Stan. I didn't miss that line, because Melanie says I missed it the first time too. I didn't miss that line. I heard him say that and I was like, oh, he's a bus driver. But I, for some reason, immediately went to buses for kids going to school. So I had it in my head that he was like, you know, a yellow bus driver. And I didn't even like think, you know, they set it up clearly. I should have seen it, but I didn't. So yeah, it's again, the local kook who has built it. This mech is the best. Like, I love how Gideon gets into it, that he's like rolled up the shoe, up the leg. And then when he gets to the top, he's covered in that suit with the ping pong balls that like what's his face had to wear when he was Gollum, and even his hair is covered in golf balls or ping pong balls. Like, it's amazing. And then the eyes of it light up and its round cheeks light up, and I think there's like an American flag pin that lights up, and all the joints, and he begins to walk out there. And it is amazing. I love this so, so, so much. So he's out there walking to track these kids down. And we see Grunkle Stan sitting in the abuela's house. And he is just having a bit of an existential crisis about how he failed these kids and that he can't believe nobody believes him about Gideon. And he's looking at the pin that Gideon gave out with his face on it, and is sitting there looking at it, saying to it, like, how did you manage to do this, kid? And all of a sudden his hearing aid like has some feedback on it again, which happened at the press conference as well. I failed to mention that, and he realizes that there is something going on with that fucking pin, and he understands the way that he can explain to everybody that Gideon is actually a bad guy and have some proof to back it up, rather than just being out here making claims. So we cut to Mabel and Dipper on the bus heading out. It's like, I really love these two. You know, I feel like I often forget that they're twins, outright twins, because Mabel just feels so much younger than Dipper. But the relationship between the two of them and how much they are constantly trying to like make each other feel better and cheer each other up. Especially Mabel, of course, because Dipper is the one that tends to let the weight of the world get to him a lot more than Mabel ever does. There's a moment later when they're fighting the mech and they are holding hands and the mech pulls them apart and they're like reaching out, trying to like hold hands for as long as they can and not let go of each other. And it's a really small detail, but it's super duper sweet to see the two of them just taking comfort in being together and just wanting to hold hands and being completely not bashful about that at all. You know, I just really liked it. So yeah, she's trying to do a, bus seat treasure hunt, which means lifting up the seats of the bus and seeing what's underneath it. And it's really horrible. And this is when he notices that the mech is chasing them and orders the driver, who turns out to be Seuss, to step on it. And what's amazing is that apparently if Grunkle Stan had not found out that these pins had cameras in them and were spying on the entire town, evidently nobody would have noticed this mech chasing the bus down the street. Like, this wasn't going to be the thing that gave Gideon away. This isn't it. This wasn't going to be like, because that was initially what I thought it was going to be, that like Gideon was, going to have become so overcome with greed about getting these, journals back that he would out himself by using this mech in public and kind of losing control of himself. And then everybody would be like, oh my God, you just like basically stomped our entire town into the ground. You are terrible. But that isn't even it. Nobody even sees this, evidently, because it's like the road out of town. So Seuss is driving, but is in training. He doesn't know how to do this super well. So he keeps on attempting to speed up, and instead he's like, you know, fucking things up and wants to hit the brakes at one point and take a turn and can't do that either. So they wind up just like running through a road closed sign, and the bus speeds to the edge of a cliff above a railroad track, which like spans that cliff. Guys, let me tell y'all, I have a fear of heights. Now, it's a selective thing where it doesn't manifest all the time. It's really, it depends. Like if somebody's, for example, in a hot air balloon and I see like a photo from the POV of the people in the hot air balloon, doesn't faze me. Nothing. That's fine. This sort of thing, it's a cartoon. And it still made my stomach like hit the roof of my mouth. I hated this. I hated this whole scene. It made me so nervous. I've been sitting next to Owen while he's playing that new Star Wars game that just came out. Something Jedi, something, I don't remember. But there is a ton of leaping from cliff to cliff or crawling along a wall really carefully while there's nothing but an abyss below you. I can't sit with him while he plays that game. I can't do it. I have a couple of times almost screamed. It's a game. It's not like, and I literally nearly have screamed in fear. No. So this whole thing, it made me very, very anxious. Now, here's Seuss sweating as the mech pulls the roof off the bus, and he's reading Bus Emergency Manual. What's closest to our present situation? Raccoon in the engine or angry grandparent won't leave the bus? And he says, probably the second one. Again, like I have expressed a bit of concern over Seuss's jokes, but they all really landed for me this episode. I'll tell you. That fucking killed me. Probably the second one. Oh, God. So, meanwhile, Dipper and Mabel have somehow, like, escaped the bus. And they are trying to run across this bridge to the safety of the cave, I guess, on the other side. And it's all boarded up and says dead end. And I'm like, yeah, but if you went in there, the mech still couldn't follow you. So probably you should just do that. But at this point, Gideon is like, what happened to the second journal? And both her and Dipper are like, second journal. And Gideon assumes that they're lying. And this is the part where he pulls them away from each other. And he begins to taunt Dipper. You still think you're some kind of hero? And he chucks Dipper onto the like cliff's edge and walks away with Mabel in his fist and says, once I find the final journal, I'll rule this town with you as my queen. And I'm just like, dude, God, really? What does that even look like? No. And I would like to point out, when Dipper lands on that cliff's edge, his nose begins bleeding. Is that the first time that we've really seen, like, blood in an injury on this show? I feel like that's not a common thing. And somehow him falling hard enough to make his nose start bleeding really bummed me out. I felt bad for the kid, you know? So the mech is walking away, holding her in his fist, and he's standing there like not sure what to do with the words that Gideon said, "You're nothing without this journal," echoing in his head. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And he begins to turn, and it looks like he's just going to walk away, having admitted failure. But then he comes catapulting out of the trees and just jumps and goes right through Gideon's eye and tackles Gideon inside of the mech's head. As this is happening, the mech itself tips over and causes a huge break in the middle of this fucking bridge, this really rickety bridge. And like the way the fight's going, there is no reason for it to stay in a linear line. They could go flying to the right or left at any point because the mech is moving along with Gideon as Gideon fights Dipper. So this thing is just basically on the edge of falling throughout this entire scene. Again, it was very difficult for me, you guys. So difficult. Dipper grabs Gideon's fist and begins to punch Gideon in the face, which causes the mech to punch itself in the face, which is hilarious. I love it the most. Gideon's mech head begins to spin around wildly, which causes him to completely lose balance. It goes over the edge. Everybody is falling. I mean, guys, I'm not kidding. I just hated this so much. I was just like, there's no way that they survive this either. Like, once it hits the ground, the explosion is like basically a mushroom cloud. Like, it's a flash of like blue-white light. This is serious. And I'm just sitting there like, how the fuck, how are they going to have made it through this? And I'm going to buy it. Well, it turns out that Mabel and Dipper like managed to cling together as they fell, and Mabel used the grappling hook to grab the bridge above them and lower them slowly to the ground. And when they get to the ground, one of the journals is sitting there, and Dipper takes it back. At this point, the cops all show up, and Gideon does indeed crawl out of the wreckage. I have to be honest, I kind of thought they were just going to have Gideon like have disappeared or died or I don't know what. Like, doesn't feel like the show where people die, really. But this is the finale of the first season. We did just see Dipper's nose start bleeding when that's not been a thing either. I was like, if they're going to have a character literally die, I guess this is the time to do it. But no, Gideon's okay, and the cops rescue him, and it's the worst, and I hate it. It was the Pines twins. They tried to attack me and blew up my statue with dynamite, and like clutches at one of the cops. I love these tiny little handcuffs that they've got. They are so small. And nothing short of a miracle could make us not trust Gideon. They're in the middle of this line when Grunkle Stan shows up in the Stanmobile, and he shows all of them the series of screens inside the mech of their private business, their moments that they thought that they were alone, in which, in fact, these buttons were watching them. And Gideon realizes that his spot has been blown up, and I love this cop. We're arresting you for conspiracy, fraud, and breaking our hearts. And they're about to put him in the back of the cop car when Grunkle Stan comes over, picks Gideon up, and just like shakes him. And another journal comes out along with the deed. I thought it was a little weird later on because I watched this a couple times, that Grunkle Stan is like picking up the deed from on top of the journal that fell out, and yet when we find out how important these journals are, it like in that moment he just lets that journal go. Does he pick up both? I'm gonna like go back 10 seconds, but yeah, he like empties out his pockets. I'm watching this like in real time because it looks like he just picks up the deed, but let me just like keep an eagle eye on this here for a second. Oh, he kind of puts his hands around both, and we don't see if he picked up the journal as well. So I guess we're meant to assume that he took it at that moment in time, but we don't actually see it. He just has it later on. So that must have been when he got it, right? Melanie says, do you remember who built the mech? It's a callback to the robots old man McGucket built. Yeah, totally. Because he was the one. I love that, like, before we even see that he's the one who built it, he's out here in the background of several scenes, just like bebopping around with his welding helmet on. Since the same bot exploded the entire downtown area, this Gideon bot didn't do much better. I mean, that's like, I want to know exactly how big this town is. I don't feel like I have a good feeling of what Gravity Falls is like. Although now I do know that the Mystery Shack is on 618 Gopher Road, which for some reason delights me no end. And Grunkle Stan starts being called like the town hero because he exposed Gideon, who rides away in the back of the cop car yelling, "You'll hear from my lawyers." Yeah, I really enjoyed this like little wrap up, and Grunkle Stan saying the Mystery Shack is back, baby, on the local news in his boxer shorts. And then we get the montage of everything being set up again. And all of the like, first there's just Mabel in front of the fireplace playing with Waddles, which is crucial. And then we see the whole crew like building the Mystery Shack again and putting up the sign. And Wendy is putting up the S and it falls off onto the ground and they just decide to leave it there again, which, you know what? Perfect. And then there's like a ton of business inside, and we get to again see this dude that's got like the tiny shorts and the eyelashes choosing between two shirts again, which I feel like, is this the same shot as like the opening of the first episode? It feels really, really familiar. And Seuss is eating a chocolate bar and reading the newspaper. Gravity Falls Gossiper, now with less typos. Lil Gideon in the big house, and an interview with his dad, in quotes, he could use a timeout. It's great. So we have the kids like unpacking their stuff, and Grunkle Stan really trying to be like casual about, you guys settling back in okay? And not letting them know that it's just like all of his happiness depends on this. And they are talking about the fact that there's like been a lot of shit happening. And Dipper's like, all right, look, I think that we need to tell you about this journal that I found in the woods. And it talks about all the crazy stuff that goes on in Gravity Falls. We thought that it was just, you know, a bit of fun, but now with more and more stuff happening, we're realizing that we probably should show it to you. And Grunkle Stan is like, hey, I'm really glad that you showed this to me, because now I understand where you're getting all of your insane ideas from. And he starts laughing, and the two of them like frown at him. He's just like, spookums and monsters. This kooky book has been filling your head with crazy conspiracies. And he's like, you've got to quit reading this fantasy nonsense for your own good. Although some of these would make great attractions. Can't come up with this stuff. Mind if I borrow this? And he shows the picture of the squash with human face and emotions. And it says underneath, he's gorgeous. I hate you. I hate all of you. And he says, mind if I borrow this? And he just runs out with the book and continues like making fun of Dipper, who's really frustrated by this. And Mabel has to be like, hey, buddy, look, you are a hero whether you have that book or not. You already pulled off some really awesome stuff. Don't get too desperate for it. And he's like, yeah, okay, I appreciate that, but also I do really want it back. And she's like, yeah, I'm sure you'll get it back. Like, what's he gonna do with it? And then we cut to Grunkle Stan in the evening going behind the secret door behind the vending machine. And he goes downstairs, and there is like an elevator with 3 floors that it like as options. He types in a series of weird symbols, and it summons the elevator. He goes downstairs, and there's a bunch of computers, screens flashing, buttons blinking, like weird pressure dials that are all at particular positions, and a camera of like the woods outside of Gravity Falls. And then there's a secret, like there's a little cubby at the desk that he sits at with, I need to point out, a picture of Dipper and Mabel on the shelf above the desk, which is the cutest thing in the entire world. And a bunch of books hidden behind this panel there. And he pulls out journal number 1 and says, after all these years, and he puts 2 and 3, and he says, finally, I have them all. And like, I really want to underline that Grunkle Stan is saying all of this as a normal human being with a regular inflection, like talking to himself, which for some reason was like the most disorienting part of this entire scene, is Grunkle Stan not talking like a shyster or fake laughing or being way too loud. He just seems like a regular person, and it's weird. So he opens all the books to the same like pages of this big plan, and he like puts them together and sort of slides back and forth at the desk between the books and this like huge series of buttons and levers and stuff. And something lights up outside. It looked like a screen, but it's not. It was like a transparent window, like when you get your x-rays done or an MRI machine done and somebody's in the other room. And he says it's working, and he runs into that room. There are 2 pairs of what look like pneumatic tube systems, like giant ones that could pick up and carry a person. And they are flanking this huge triangle that begins to glow. And Stan just stands there and watches the light like brighten and says, "Here we go." And then it ends, which was the meanest thing that's ever happened. Here we go what, Stan? Here we go what? What does that mean? What are you doing even? What is this? What? Melanie says, what do you think will become of Gideon in season 2? Ooh, I don't know, because like he's clearly got to try and come back. So I feel like whatever it is, he somehow takes control of whatever Grunkle Stan has like set into motion here. I just am like, oh, she has another question. Since we know Grunkle Stan had a journal, maybe that is where he got ideas for Mystery Shack attractions. Maybe. That "here we go" gives me chills, right? Like it's a weird thing where I'm like, no, I want to know more about what Grunkle Stan thinks is going to happen here too, because what he expects may not at all be what happens. So I don't know where he stands on this, how educated he actually is, how much he knows. And the whole way that like this all goes down with Gideon, like attempting to, was he aware that Gideon was after the journals in the first place? Did he know that's why Gideon kept on like bumping heads with him? Because, you know, he says something about how like for some reason Gideon keeps trying to like ruin my business. But was he aware the entire time? Oh no, this kid's after the fucking books that or at least one of the ones that I have. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just extremely curious now. So I don't have theories about this. You know, I want Grunkle Stan to be, not like a power hungry lunatic, but there is nothing about that setup that doesn't feel like a power hungry lunatic to me. So what could it be? What is, you know, and there's also the fact that like Grunkle Stan, there's a lot of reference to like the Illuminati in this show. There's, you know, the eyes everywhere with the triangles. He is wearing one of those like Masons hats. What are they called? Masonic, you know, little toques. There's just a lot of stuff that's like meant to be part of that like conspiracy sort of, what's the word I want? The tropes and cliches surrounding what people think of when they think of a conspiracy theory, you know? I just have no idea. And also like, you know, the whole premise of this show is that these two kids are out here for summer break. Now that can go on forever as far as I'm concerned. And I wouldn't be at all bothered by the fact that they apparently are never going to go home again. But I wonder if this is the kind of show that would do that, or because they have brought up the fact that these two have actual parents and that they can be sent home, and, you know, that it's coming to the end of the summer. Like it's been mentioned how long they've been here, which feels like this show is not unwilling to go there in terms of its story. So I am also really curious if we're going to see their home and their parents at any point, you know. It's not something that I could say I particularly want it to go one way or the other. I'm just extremely unsure of how the show would handle something like that. So really, it's less about, I want to see where they're from. I want to see what their parents are like, and more like, I want to know if this is a kind of show that would expand into a whole other, I don't want to say a whole other universe because that's too large, but a show that would be willing to step outside of a familiar setting that we have gotten to know really well. I don't know if that's something they would be interested in or not. And if they did, could they pull it off or not? You know? Melanie says, Dipper found a journal. Gideon may have found his. Where do you think Stan got his? Now, see, this is the question, because it's, you know, been mentioned that they have been written by some mysterious author. One could think that Stan wrote them all, and like they aren't as old as they look, but that he created them. They got separated for some reason, and then he had to try and track them down again. I wouldn't hate that. It doesn't, like, I prefer it only because I like the idea that Grunkle Stan wasn't just somebody seeking a thing, but that he also came up with the thing, because that gives him a little bit more agency and more intelligence than as viewers we've really given him credit for. So part of me wants to believe that, and that he just happened to still have one of them. Gideon had 2, right? And Dipper had 3. So Grunkle Stan had 1. Maybe he found it when he bought the shack, but I don't have any good timeline for when that is. Yeah, I don't know. He could have just found it in the woods also, you know? But there's just so much weird stuff in the shack itself. So many hidden rooms. So many things like the room of all of the wax figures. And a carpet experiment that apparently makes you switch bodies, that I can't really like discount that the Mystery Shack is part and parcel with all of the journals and everything, you know, like this whole setup with this machine and these computers directly below the shack, which tie in apparently completely with the journals. It feels like this machine had to have been built at around the same time that these journals were written. And there's really nothing to say that these journals are particularly ancient tomes. It's just the assumption because they're like, you know, weathered. But that can happen really easily. Doesn't take that long. So yeah, I'm going to say Stan got his because he wrote it and never got rid of it. And maybe he hid the other 2 for some reason that will be revealed. And when he went back to get them, they were gone. I don't know, though, because, like, Dipper finding the one that he did, it didn't seem like it was that hard for him to find. There was a pretty obvious, like, button in the woods that pointed to it. So you'd think that if Stan had been really looking, that he would have been able to find that very, very easily. So I don't know if that's like actually relevant or if that's just, you know, something that I shouldn't read into too much. But yeah, I don't know. And I stand by my earlier, like, kind of joke assertion. I would love it if it turned out that Seuss was like this weird mastermind somehow, and that they had all just been misunderstanding him and underestimating him. I think that'd be really, really funny. But yeah, Grunkle Stan has proven over and over again to be very interesting. So I am delighted to have this extra layer added on top of it all. Melanie says, so official prediction is that Stan is the author. Or is it Seuss? I want it to be Seuss. Can I say? I'm just going to go with that. Official prediction, Seuss is the author. I've got nothing. Absolutely zero evidence to support this. I just want that to be the thing, though. If that were true, it would make me so, so happy. It would, like, even as crazy as it is, me predicting it right now, it would not take away from the insanity of that reveal at all. At all. I would love it. So, yeah, I'm going to say I want Seuss as the author. There. Boom. Done. Or Wendy. It'd be great if it was just some, random, somebody else that was, like, in the background. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to go with Seuss. All right, guys. Well, next time I'm going to be live watching the first and second, right, Melanie, episodes live on Facebook Live. So if y'all are interested in hanging out with me, hopefully I'm thinking about like whether or not this is going to be up in time to give you the warning on there. That will be on the 7th of January. That's my dad's birthday. So yeah, that should be plenty of time. This will be up long before. So I'll be live watching episodes 1 and 2 on the 7th. And then on the 10th, I will actually be recording on it. So, yeah, that's cool. I'm excited. All right, guys. Thank you again all so much for listening. Thank you, Melanie, for bearing with me and coming up with the idea to watch the shorts, which I'm really looking forward to. And I will be seeing you all again soon with the new episodes. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.